Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers Q&A. First off, I just want to say to everyone, I hope you are safe out there, especially those in the Los Angeles area. It's obviously been a crazy few days. Lakers have had a couple of games postponed. People have had to evacuate. It's just that I've never quite seen anything like this going back to COVID. What's up, everybody in the chat? Quickly, I just wanted to say on my end, thankfully, I've been safe and away from the fires. The closest it got was about 3 miles, the Runyon Canyon fires, but ultimately didn't have to evacuate. My parents did have to evacuate from my childhood home, and that was a scary situation. We're about an hour from them, so and really right in between us is the Palisades fire, so there was a bit uncertainty with that, but fortunately they were only gone for a few hours and were able to return home, and everything was okay. So largely been unaffected in like a personal level, but I do know people who have lost their homes. Obviously the situation with JJ is tragic, and it's just been a really rough few days. No basketball as well, so there's been no sense of distraction or an escape. So really a weird, tough few days, and it's far from over. The fires are still going, and the winds are supposed to pick up next week, so that could be ongoing, and there could be new fires. But wanted to tap in with you all. I miss everyone in the chat, everyone watching and listening. It had been too long, so I'm back, and I'm ready to talk some Lakers basketball now that we got that out of the way. So if you guys have any questions, let's get into it. Sam Davison says, prayers to all involved in the horrible wildfires. Yes. And you guys might have seen, I tweeted it out, but the Lakers are going to be doing a donation drive at the game tomorrow against San Antonio. So that's the latest update on everything. So the Lakers are tentatively scheduled to play San Antonio, their first game after having the last couple postponed against the Spurs. And was it the Hornets? I'm blanking on who the other team was. And I know the Clippers were supposed to play the Hornets as well. But yeah, so Lakers will be doing a donation drive. So if you're going to the game, or if you're just in the downtown area, they'll also be doing some donation drives throughout the week that you can donate goods and clothes and stuff that will go a long way in helping people. All right, first one from Mamadou. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, would you be willing to trade Rui for Bruce Brown since we need ball handling and defense? Yes, I would. And this has been a trade that I've talked about in recent weeks. This is a trade that last episode of Buha's Block, I had Jason Timpf on, and we went through what we felt were the biggest needs for the Lakers. And this was the structure of a trade that we settled on. So there's certainly some risk here. I would point to Bruce Brown's, the health situation to me is the biggest thing. He had knee surgery right before the season and just returned to playing a couple weeks ago. So I would like to see a little bit more of a sample size from him just being healthy and looking more like himself. The other thing is the shooting. Rui is a better shooter than Bruce Brown, so you are downgrading there. But in terms of two-way play, I think Bruce Brown has a higher floor and potentially higher ceiling as a two-way player. I think he checks a couple of the boxes. So to your point, I think he's a better and more versatile defender, but he also brings a level of ball handling. He was the backup point guard for the Denver Nuggets during that 2023 title run. So you could start him potentially and move Max to the bench, or you could keep Max in the starting lineup if you want to, just embolden him, keep him with that role and not disrupt the starting lineup continuity. Max has been playing really well. Then you just bring Bruce Brown off the bench, and he's almost like the backup point guard, but then defensively he can defend ones, twos, threes. So I think for me, a big part of this would have to come down to Vando and his health, and what does Vando look like? When does he return? Does he return before the end of the month? Does he return with enough time to evaluate this group before the February 6th trade deadline? And if you can get some semblance of confidence that Vando is back and that he's contributing and that he looks okay, of course, there's no guarantees he's going to stay healthy. But if Vando's back, I think between DFS, Max, and Vando, you can get away with potentially trading Rui and bringing in a slightly smaller player. If Vando doesn't return, or he has another setback, or he doesn't look quite like himself, then all of a sudden I think it's a different conversation, and you might want to prioritize the bigger wing / like forward in Rui. But I do think Bruce Brown, like I've talked about it, I think the Lakers have 3 general needs. I think they need one more two-way wing. I think they need a little bit more playmaking, just another kind of reliable ball handler playmaker in the rotation now that D'Lo's gone, and then the backup 5 spot. It's tough to check all 3 boxes. I think realistically you can only check 2 of them. However, I think a Bruce Brown type player potentially gets you there. I think another guy that's interesting is Lonzo Ball, and he's 6'6" and has been a good defender throughout his career. Obviously brings a certain level of playmaking. So maybe you can play him as sort of that like backup point guard who also defends up on shooting guards and even maybe some small forwards. He is making a similar salary to Bruce Brown, so I would prefer Bruce Brown between the two. But I think that type of player who can bring a certain level of size and defensive versatility while also being able to run the offense, initiate, and play make a bit, I think that player checks potentially a couple boxes with the wing and the ball handling. And that's where guys like a Bruce Brown or Alonzo Ball are appealing to me, because you could check that and then potentially go find a cheap backup center. Of course, on the high end, a Walker Kessler, and that's going to cost some draft capital. But maybe you can find one of these, take a flyer on a Day'Ron Sharp, a Nick Richards, someone like that, and just have, kind of bolster your backup 5 spot that way. And then now you've kind of checked the 3 boxes among 2 players. Let's see, we got several super chats. Shabugan, thank you for the super chat. Glad to hear you're okay, mate. Being Australian, we have a lot of experience watching bushfires, but even with that, this looks insane. Stay safe. Thank you. And thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I mean, it's just been, I fortunately have not been near the Palisades area or even the Altadena, Pasadena fires, but just from, just knowing, like growing up here, having a bunch of friends here, and seeing everyone posting their stories, like so many people I know have been evacuated, and posting the aftermath, especially in the Palisades. Like it looks like a war zone there. It looks like something insane happened, and something insane did happen, but like it looks like that, there was like an attack or something. Like it's just completely destroyed, and it's unlike anything I can ever remember. Like already the count is over 10,000 structures between homes, businesses, and buildings have been burned down. And that's just an insane amount. Like it's the worst fire in Los Angeles history, like by far. And as an area that does tend to have fires, like I was evacuated once in 8th grade, and there's been times I've almost been evacuated through the years, but nothing like this. This is just madness, and it's really, really sad. Super chat from Jazz_Singh. Are BB and Abaji gettable for a protected first from Toronto? I think Bruce Brown is. I'm not sure on Abaji. I know that he's an I would like him if there was a way to get him. If the protected first situation is a little complicated for the Lakers, so I've gotten a little bit more clarity on this, but if they protect the 2029 first, you can protect the 2029 and have it roll over to be a 2030 first. But in that case, you would not have access to that 2031 first because of the Stepien rule. And so if you're potentially digging into that 2030 pick and using that, or there's a contingency to use that, then you can't have access to that 2031 trade. So the protections with the first are a little tricky. They can't protect the 2031 first as of right now. I mean, you could go out and acquire second round picks in those years and then technically have those be the protected or the part of the protection that conveys. So let's say they go out and get a 2029 second from somebody in a prior deal. They could then protect it where, okay, if we're going to protect this 2029 first, and if it doesn't convey, then it will be a 2029 second from this team that we just acquired the pick from. But that would require them to do that before agreeing to one of these trades. Or I don't know if they could do it in like a 3-team trade and technically apply that protection within the trade. I'm not quite at that level of a cap expert, but basically the protections are kind of tricky. And really, if they protect that 2029 pick, it would have to be a 2030 rolling over first. And then that limits, you can't then use the 2031. So that's basically like they probably have to do unprotected picks unless they can get creative and do a prior trade, which is certainly possible. And I think if they do go get a second in 2029, 2030, or 2031, that would be a side that they're probably trying to use one of their picks and protect them. But I'd like Bruce Brown and Agbaji together. I think that the price for Agbaji is like, it's someone that they value and want to keep longer term. So maybe a protected first can get you in that conversation. You might have to throw in a second or something, but I would in general would like the framework of that deal. Shabugan, number 1, Kessler held out today. Cranjus seems to think Boston is in play. Any thoughts? 2, are the postponed games likely to lead to more back-to-backs? I will answer the second one first. I'm not sure yet I've not gotten any sense of when they're going to add the back-to-backs. I wouldn't be surprised, add the 2 postponed games. I wouldn't be surprised if they added one during All-Star, the All-Star break, kind of because they have that break of like a few days coming out of the weekend, and maybe they add like that Wednesday or something, one of the games, and then later in the season that they find a pocket to add the second one. I think that would kind of make sense. I don't think the players would be happy about having to lose part of their All-Star break, but that just from like a logistical perspective, I think would make some sense. And as far as I haven't heard anything with Kessler and Boston, I mean, that would be, talk about doing a friend a favor if Danny Ainge sent Kessler to Boston. I mean, that, in my opinion, I already think Boston's the best team in the league and should be the favorite, but that would take them to, I think, like a different level, especially with some of the uncertainty, like with Porzingis and his health. That's always a factor for them. So just having Kessler there, I haven't heard anything on that, but that would be a really good get for Boston. Super chat from G Isobar. What about trading for Mann, Richards, and Green? So one thing with this, if you're talking about these 3, so Trey Mann, Nick Richards, Josh Green, if you're taking back 3 guys, you do have to send out 3 guys. So from a salary matching, not just from a salary matching perspective in terms of taking back salary, but like Lakers can't technically take an extra player. So they would have to send out 3 guys. I like each player individually. And I think you can make the case that on a lower level, they check the boxes of playmaking, backup big, and another 2-way type wing. If I'm the Lakers, I'm trying to aim higher. I know Josh Green's a popular name that has been thrown out there recently. Nick Richards has been a name that's been seemingly on the market for a while. And I know Trey Mann has been very popular in this chat. He's a guy that people often reference, but I would aim higher to be quite honest. Like I'm okay with plugging one of the holes with because to me, all these guys project as like low level rotation guys on a good team, and that's okay to add. Like again, if this is the best the Lakers can do, then that's the best they can do. But I feel like with having 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks and multiple swaps, you should be able to get better players than these 3. So again, if the market plays out a certain way and the Lakers don't really like the prices and maybe their top targets go for more than they're anticipating or just get traded elsewhere and they're no longer there, I'm okay with this as like a backup plan, but I wouldn't target these three guys as my plan A, to be honest, or even potentially my plan B. I think that there are some higher upside guys. And if you're the Lakers, I think you really got to be thinking about upside swings. And that's where a guy like Robert Williams to me is so enticing, because it could flame out. And like if it's, let's say it's like Gabe Vincent and JHS or Christian Wood or whatever for Robert Williams, the salary off the top of my head is pretty close there. It could flame out, right? And Robert Williams could get injured. He could be worse than Gabe Vincent. That's certainly possible. But the upside of Robert Williams is like a starting level big man who is an elite finisher, is an elite shot blocker and rim protector, and I think would be a huge X factor for the Lakers at potentially the cost of like Gabe Vincent and 2 second-round picks or maybe a protected first. And that to me is the type of high upside risk that I would take if I'm the Lakers, because realistically, like I've said this multiple times, but for them to really hit that ceiling and for them to be on the level of a Boston, OKC, Cleveland, or at least have a puncher's chance at beating one of those teams, you have to have guys who are high upside guys who can really swing your ceiling. And I think a guy like a Robert Williams, checks that box. So to me, I would be aiming for more upside here, but I don't like, if that's ultimately what it comes down to, I think trading for these types of guys is better than standing pat, depending on what the package is. And I don't think for this type of package, you would have to even give up a first. So that's potentially an enticing part, again, if you can't get better guys. Mamadou, thank you for the super chat again. What do you think about our bench offense? Is stagnant at times? Do you think we should trade for a scorer off the bench? So I think one potential solution is just moving Rui to the bench and starting Dorian Finney-Smith and empowering Rui more as a bench scorer type. As a starter, Rui is always going to be at best the number 4 option. Maybe there's some nights or matchups where he's the number 3 and Austin takes a slight step back, but really with the way that Austin has been playing, the way that the Lakers have been leaning on him more offensively and as a primary ball handler and initiator and playmaker, like Rui, I think, has taken a clear step back as the number 4. And I would almost rather see him come off the bench. And I think he has some of that, like Kuzma, and we've seen it from Rui before when he's been in a bench role earlier in his Lakers career, but he can be a bit of an X factor off the bench in terms of energy and just providing scoring pop. So I think he's got that skill set, and there's a case to be made that staggering him and LeBron a little bit more, playing him more at the 4, and also maybe running some more offense for him in second unit looks. That to me would make some sense and potentially at least improve the bench scoring, because for like DFS has been outscoring him lately, or it's been pretty close, but like DFS is not a guy you want to be like running offense for necessarily, or trying to get going. He's more of just a spot up shooter, catch and shoot guy, attack closeouts. And he's more of like a garbage guy in terms of just picking up the scraps of the offense and finding, like, just chipping in here and there and accumulating points. Rui is more of a scorer, and I think that's been marginalized a bit with the way that the Lakers have ran their offense, more through AD, more through Austin, and of course LeBron is still going to be LeBron. So I think just the simple flip of DFS in for Rui, I think DFS has been playing better, and I think he's a better fit with the starters. I think you get more reps for that group, but then you also, I think, potentially put Rui in a better position to be more effective offensively. So in terms of like another playmaker scorer, I think it's a luxury if there's a trade that makes sense. Like if they're trading with Utah and they're going to get Kessler, and Sexton or Jordan Clarkson is a throw-in into that trade, or just an additional salary to kind of make it work, and Utah get off a player that maybe they no longer want on their books, I'm open to that if I'm the Lakers. But in terms of actually targeting a bench scorer, I think they have bigger needs. And I think, again, it's another two-way wing. I think it's a better backup five. And I think it's like maybe that player could also be a hybrid, like playmaker, ball handler type, and you check that box. But for me, that's like the third need. I would prioritize one more wing upgrade and a better backup five. And then I would put that playmaker, ball handler spot at like number 3 in terms of my rankings of the Lakers' needs. Stefan, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, hope you and yours are doing okay. Question, would you do Rui plus Dalton and a first-round pick for Miles Turner? Gracias from Portland. That's an interesting trade. I've said I've become more open to trading Dalton. That this is really close for me, to be honest, because I think that the cost for Miles Turner would probably be at least 1 first, if not potentially 2. And so you're getting close there with, if you value Dalton as the almost a first round alternative. I'd really have to think about it. Off the top of my head, I'm leaning toward a slight yes. And it's more to do with just, I don't think Dalton to me looks like he's going to be ready for a real playoff role. I think he has a lot of room for growth defensively, to put it kindly. And I think offensively, he's been pretty inconsistent with his shooting, his footwork. I think he still has ways to go in terms of reading a defense and his decision making. So longer term, I think there's a lot of upside with Dalton. But if we're looking at this as like a 6 to 18 month window of potentially winning a championship with LeBron and AD, I think Miles Turner makes more sense than Rui and Dalton. And now I know he hasn't had a good season by his standards, and Indiana has been underachieving at times. So like there's some risk there for sure that he isn't as good as he was last year. But I think Miles Turner, I've said this before, he's like a lab grown big man complement to AD. And if you could have an elite rim protector who can also space the floor, it's the best of both worlds. We've seen it in Milwaukee with Brook Lopez next to Giannis. Miles Turner is different player, but some similarities there just in terms of the defense and the floor spacing. And I think that would unlock a lot with the Lakers on both ends of the floor. So I'm leaning towards a slight yes, but it's a lot. It's certainly a lot. And it could come back to haunt you down the road. I would maybe try and protect that first if I'm the Lakers in this case. But in terms of like a win now move, I think Miles Turner would improve this group for sure. Shibugan again. Where's Christian Wood? He was ahead of Vando. I think that's something that like Lakers canceled the last 2 practices. There's been no games, so we haven't had an availability in a few days. There's been no updates on Wood. We've seen him doing stationary shooting at practices, but it seems like Vando has now surpassed him and is ahead of him. But it will be something that is asked potentially tomorrow. There's going to be a lot to ask tomorrow because there's going to be a lot of media that was not at the practice that's going to want to talk to JJ about his house and everything that's been going on. There's also the Michael Cooper jersey retirement, so that's going to be a big topic tomorrow. So there's going to be a lot to ask and get updated on, but I would assume either tomorrow or the next availability, we will ask about Christian Wood, see if there's an update. And they had said there was going to be an update soon, and it's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. So it's time to ask, but I haven't heard anything of substance with Christian. Britton, thank you for the super chat. Opinion on Aaron Nesmith. I know Golden State is interested, but I think he would fit perfectly at the 2 or 3 for us. I'm willing to use a first. Yeah, I like Aaron Nesmith. I don't know what he's making off the top of my head. I'm going to quickly pull up his contract. He's making about 11. So you could get there. Yeah, he's making $11 million a year for the next 3 years, including this year. So he's got 2 more years. You can get there with Gabe, and I would do Gabe in a first for Aaron Nesmith. I don't know if that moves the needle enough for Indiana, but they are shedding technically an extra year of salary, though I think he's a plus asset. But maybe they acknowledge that this group right now isn't championship caliber, and taking that slight step back within the rotation, going from Neesmith to Gabe, getting that first down the road is more enticing to them. So that's actually, I really like that potential trade. I think that makes, I would try to protect it if I'm the Lakers. Like any of these firsts, you at least try to protect. But as I mentioned earlier, the protections are a little complicated. So you got to be careful that protecting it doesn't prevent you from being able to use a second one if you are going to go down that road. Steve Stevenson, thank you for the super chat. How do we land Keon Ellis? Well, you got to trade for him. And so he's another one that I don't think he's making too much. I'm pulling up his contract. Let's see. Yeah, so he's only making $2.1 million. He's got a $2.3 million team option next year. So that's a pretty, like, you could get, I guess you could flip JHS. If you could do JHS and 2 second-round picks for Keon Ellis, I would do that. I don't know that I don't think he's worth a first. It's all like, it's always relative, right? Like you could always make the case for, if someone is a rotation player, you could argue that they are worth a first-round pick, because most first-round picks, like, you're just hoping to get a rotation caliber player. I like Keon Ellis, but I think for me that the price, I would do something like JHS and 2 firsts. Like, could they use Cam Reddish in their rotation as a bigger wing? I mean, not 2 firsts, sorry, 2 seconds, not 2 firsts for Keon Ellis, 2 seconds. But yeah, if you could do JHS, they take a flyer on him in 2 seconds. That's like probably the most I'd pay. I don't think I'd give up a first. BW with an interesting super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Why don't coaches ever get traded? So I think the last coach who got traded was the Celtics. Technically traded Doc Rivers to the Clippers, and there might have been a first-round pick involved. Traded to Clippers from Celtics. Yeah. So June 25th, 2013, the Clippers acquired Doc Rivers from the Celtics for an unprotected 2015 first-round pick. So what was the 2015 NBA draft? I forgot who they got. I feel like it wasn't that good of a player, if a good player at all. But it would have been... Sorry, I'm trying to... I think it was RJ Hunter. RJ Hunter. No, or was it Terry Rozier? Not, because it would have been... Yeah. No, it was RJ Hunter. So, yeah. It's rare, though. I'm off the top of my head, that's the last time a coach has been traded. Steve Stevenson, Keon is worth Gabe and JHS since he's a starter, maybe even a first. I mean, so the money with Gabe would be tough because Gabe's making a little over 11. So I don't think Sacramento just wants to take on an extra $9 million. JHS, yes, he's worth maybe a first. I just like, I'll put it this way. I think Dorian Finney-Smith is better, and he went for 3 seconds. Now you could argue 3 seconds. I think Crane just made this argument in his last episode that I think Kevin Pelton had some chart where 3 seconds, let's say like 45th pick is average to like the 18th pick. So those seconds, just throwing 3 of them together does have potentially like mid first round value. I would say Keon at 2 seconds feels appropriate in my opinion, but you know, it comes down to what the Lakers feel like they need. I would just say, I don't know that he can help. Like he could help. He's lower on my list of potential fits personally. Brad D, are you allowed to bet on NBA games, or does your job covering the team restrict that? I am not allowed to bet on NBA games. I actually found out this year I have a vote for awards. So I'd had a awards vote 2 years ago, didn't have it last year. They tried to, for the beat writers in the market, they tried to rotate it. So like last year, Kobe Price of the Orange County Register had it. Then the year before I had it. This year I have it again. So with the awards, having an awards vote, you cannot bet on NBA games, NBA awards, anything. And being a media member, you're not supposed to. Like, are there can you circumvent it and bet through a friend or something? Sure, but I wouldn't take. I'm not gonna Jonte Porter it. It's not worth the risk. And for what it's worth, Lakers just announced there's no shoot around tomorrow, so that potentially would have been an opportunity to try and talk to Christian or Vando or something, but no shoot around. Mr. TD, if you were to bet Lakers or Spurs, I think so. I'm just gonna say I think I'm confident the Lakers are going to come out with the requisite urgency to win tomorrow. I will say that. Christian, thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, glad you're safe. I was tearing up watching the JJ interview. How do you ask basketball questions with so much going on outside the game? That was really tough. And I would equate it to, so I was covering the Clippers when Kobe passed, and it happened. Clippers were in Orlando to play the Magic. And for those who remember, that was the pregame presser where Doc was crying before the game and talking about it because it happened a couple hours before that game. And that was just one of the toughest things as a reporter, just to be there. And, he was sharing Kobe stories and the wars that they had through the years and like just that experience. And then of course, from then on, like the Lakers and all the stuff that was going on with that, but that was just really tough press conference to be a part of. And the JJ one, like for me, I said it yesterday on Sean Davis's charity stream that, being a father and hearing the anecdote about his son in Brooklyn last year did an art project of a charcoal sketched lighthouse. And that was something that they hung above their staircase. And that was something that they lost, that it's like no amount of money is going to get that back. Right. Like he could draw another one, I guess, but like, it's just not the same. And I think that was something that, in my opinion, there's been a lot of disgusting discourse over the last few days in terms of rich people losing their houses. And I just think, like, regardless of what you think about rich people or whatever, like at the end of the day, like a house is someone's home, and there are priceless memories, mementos. There's just stuff that you can't just buy again. Like, can JJ Redick go get another house? Yes. Can he go get another car? Can he go get new material objects? Like, yes, but there are, he said anything of value and substance with his wife over the past 20 years was in that house, and they lost. Anything with his kids over the past 10 years was in his house, and he lost. I would assume too, he had a bunch of memorabilia, Duke stuff, stuff from Orlando, stuff from with the Clippers, stuff throughout his career, signed jerseys, signed memorabilia, signed stuff that like you're not getting back. So there's just stuff that, like, again, I not to get too much into the class stuff, but like people stuff is people stuff, and it's just it's an unfortunate situation. But to go back to like asking questions, like you just have to do your job. It was tough to be there and hear JJ share the loss of community and feeling like, he shared about his wife being skeptical of coming to LA, moving back here, him coaching the Lakers and them losing the community they had in Brooklyn. And then talking about like, we finally found that in the Palisades and the rec center and our kids playing there. And he was about to coach his kids and be able to go to half the practices and games. And Then the rec center burns down and they lose that. And they're actually supposed to have their first practice that Wednesday, the day he was getting back from Dallas. It was supposed to be the first practice with his sons on their rec team. So it's like, that's just stuff that it doesn't matter how much money you have, like whatever. It's just that sucks. There's really, and again, and I would even point to like, take JJ out of it. Like, think about his kids. Like, his kids are 8 and 10. They're going through that. Like, it doesn't matter if you grow up with money as a kid, like losing your house, losing your stuff, like that's awful. That's horrible. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So just some of the discourse really bothered me, to be honest. Callie Recline, thank you for the super chat. More win now player, Miles T. M. Bridges or LaVine? I'm assuming you're saying Miles Bridges and not Mikal Bridges. I would lean Miles Turner among these three. Miles Bridges, it's in the past, but there would certainly be some backlash, I think, for the Lakers trading for him, just with his past situations, we'll say. And I think that stuff would resurface and he would be asked about it and have to talk about it. And so that could be a potential distraction off the court with that. LaVine, we just haven't seen him in a winning situation, so it's tough to say from a skill set and talent perspective. Obviously, he's easily like a top 50 player in the league from a skill and talent perspective, but can that translate to winning basketball? Can he adapt to being like a number 3 and even potentially at times a number 4 behind? I think like him and Austin would be kind of right there, especially if, like, I think Austin's a better passer than Zach LaVine. So even if LaVine is coming in and being like the number 3 shot creator scorer, there's still going to be a level of Austin having the ball and running the offense, unless he's in that trade, which I don't think the Lakers would do, and I don't think would make sense. So among these three, I think the cleanest fit and the guy we've seen be on a deep playoff run and play in meaningful games and play fairly well is Miles Turner. So I would lean Miles Turner. Super chat from Kronos. If we put Vando on guards anyways, could he close with Austin, Doe, Braun, and AD on nights when Max is off, like Jason says, and does that mitigate the Bruce Brown need? Potentially, you could make that case. I would, like, the one thing with Vando closing in big games, and it goes back to the 2023 playoff run, is like he progressively was played off the floor in all 3 series. And if you look at, I've made this point before, but if you look at game 1 and you look at game 4, game 6, whatever, depending on the series, Vando's minutes progressively go down. Like it's almost a steep decline from game 1 on as teams are able to scheme him off the floor. Now, I think he showed progress last year, and we didn't get a chance to see him in the 2024 playoffs. So that's a bit of data that we just were unable to get. But based on the last playoff data we have with him, it was not pretty in terms of, he had some good moments in particularly the Memphis and Golden State series, Golden State, especially against Steph. But even then, I think his value overall started to decline a bit later in the series. And in Memphis, it was more of a Rui series. Denver was more of a Rui series. So I view Vando more as a bench player who can help in like the middle first through early to middle fourth. And then I have some concerns about him closing important games, to be honest, just because of the offensive limitations. Now, maybe JJ is going to study that film of the progress that they made last year in the 2 weeks before Vando got injured. Maybe he can implement some of those things with him as a cutter and him as a hub around the elbows, and just leveraging some of his passing and ball handling skills that he had. I mean, he played some point guard growing up, so he does have some on-ball skills that I don't think he's always been, that's not the way he's always been used. But potentially, I would still posit that, like, if it's Bruce Brown versus Rui, I still would lean Bruce Brown in terms of a guy I would trust in, like a foxhole guy. I think Bruce Brown has done it before at a high level and played a really important role on that Denver team, where at times he was their fourth or fifth best player for stretches there. And like I would say probably on average, like their fifth best, but fourth to sixth, because that team was deep, especially the starters plus Bruce Brown, like that was a really good top six, but he had stretches there, especially during the Lakers series where he was excellent. And so to get back to it, like can Vando, I guess, be the max insurance, and can he be the DFS insurance? Like, sure. My question kind of is, if Vando becomes Vando again, and DFS eventually moves into the starting lineup or like has a bigger role, where does Rui fit in? And do the Lakers have the need for like an offensive minded four who can sometimes have a low motor, can sometimes struggle on the glass, can struggle defensively? And like, would you rather have that, or would you rather have a Bruce Brown who comes with some injury risk and comes with some shooting risk? And those are two things I don't want to overlook or dismiss. Like those are two legitimate, if the Lakers ultimately decide not to trade for him, and those are the two reasons that they don't, I understand it. But I also think he potentially checks the two positional needs in terms of another ball handler and another two-way wing. And he's also been, to me, Bruce Brown strikes me as a guy who plays well in good situations and doesn't play as well. Like we see it with some role players where they play better when they're in a better situation. And I don't think that's crazy, because your shot quality is going to be higher. Like the stakes are higher. Like, you think Bruce Brown wants to be playing in Toronto right now for a team that's going to be fighting for a top 5 pick? Like, no. And he originally signed with Indiana because he wanted the most money possible, and then now he got traded as part of the Siakam trade, and now he's in Toronto. So I think he's a guy who rises to the moment, and personally, I would just trust him more over Rui. But to your point, you could use Vando, I guess, as that Bruce Brown somewhat like option. It's just the shoot, like, for as bad as Bruce Brown has shot the last like year and a half, Vando's at a different level in terms of being a negative shooter. Sound Automotive Group, sorry. Thank you for the super chat. Assuming Vando's back, Rui, JHS, Wood, and picks for Bruce Brown. Gabe Vincent plus picks for Cam Thomas and Day'Ron Sharpe. You do address the needs of wing, ball handler, scorer, and another big. My one concern with Cam Thomas is I just don't know how much his skill set translates to winning basketball. To me, he's like the prototypical gunner who just has not, he's yet to find a shot that he doesn't think he's capable of making. And that player can be valuable if that skill set is reined in. I just think sometimes when those guys are young, they like, I think Cam Thomas is still in like prove it, establish myself mode. And I don't know how that would translate into a winning team where like he's not going to start. So he's going to be coming off the bench, especially if they're adding Bruce Brown too. Like it's going to be Bruce Brown or Max starting in the backcourt, and it's going to be Cam Thomas as more of like a 6th or 7th man type. And is he willing to buy in defensively? Because if he doesn't defend, like, I mean, it's like JJ's made it clear that especially the bench guys, like you got to be able to defend. And Cam Thomas, I think, will bring a certain offensive ceiling, but I have major concerns about the defense, major concerns about just the offensive role and how he fits with this group and being lower in the pecking order than he was in Brooklyn. And like, because this is a dude who I legitimately think would be on the court with LeBron, AD, and Austin and be like, I'm the best scorer on the court. And he certainly has like that. He has an incredible offensive ceiling, but in terms of a winning basketball structure, he needs to be much lower in the totem pole than I think he thinks. So that's my read on that. Otherwise, I enjoy, like, if you could get Cam Thomas to buy in and be like a Jordan Clarkson type, but Bruce Brown and Day'Ron Sharpe are both high on my list of potential guys for sure. Stefan, again, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Rui, Gabe, Dalton, and a first for Cam Johnson and Sharp. I like Dalton, but all in on getting something of value and consolation or consolidating resources a bit. I think I would do that. Especially if you could protect the first. I think Brooklyn would fight you on protecting it, but I mean, it's a lot. It is a lot just because it's like kind of like, I guess, Rui and 2 firsts if we're equating Dalton to another first. But I mean, Cam Johnson is clearly the best player in this deal. Brooklyn's asking for 2 firsts for him. And then I really like Sharp as a backup big man and gives you a bit of a different look than Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood and even Christian Koloko. So I would lean yes. I think this one's close to me, but I would lean yes. Going to go about 20 more minutes or so. Jermaine Thomas, who is your personal favorite target? Well, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the very direct question, putting me on the spot here. Walker Kessler is my favorite target. I have said that or hinted at that before. I don't know if I've come out and said that. I am going to be doing a trade video. It was potentially supposed to be coming out tomorrow. Things have been sidetracked a bit with all the madness of the past few days, but at some point within the next 7 to 10 days, I am going to be doing my own list of ranking trade targets 1 through 10 of who I think the Lakers should go after and guys who are realistic, and also putting out strengths, weaknesses, their fit with the Lakers, and then what I think a realistic package would be for that person. So I'm going to be working on that over the next week or so. But for me, Walker Kessler, he checks just so many boxes of, I think he helps the Lakers now. He helps them in the future. He is young. He is a player who is outperforming his current contract because he's still on his rookie contract. He's making just, I want to say just over $3 million, somewhere around the $3 million range, and then has another year left. So you will have to pay him in the summer of 2026. But I mean, that could also be the summer that LeBron is retiring and coming off the books, and you're moving to the next iteration of Lakers basketball. But I just think Walker Kessler can start, can come off the bench. At a minimum, he's like a 24 to 26 minute a night guy. I think he'd fit well next to AD. We've seen that type of big work next to AD. I think AD and LeBron have wanted another big, so I think those guys would be willing to adjust and adapt their games. I don't think either one is quite in the same place athletically or physically as where they were in 2020. There are some concerns maybe about spacing offensively and defensive mobility, but I think having a guy like you are locking down the center position for 48 minutes a night, and then also having the optionality to play a 2 big look for anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes a night. So I think it's just he to me, especially when looking at the cost of if it's JHS in a first or Dalton in a first, at most you're giving up a back end rotation guy and potentially adding a starter or a high level bench guy, and it's only going to cost you like 1 young player and a pick potentially. Like that to me is just a no brainer. So I would say if I'm kind of splitting it salary wise, I would say favorite prospect over or target overall is Walker Kessler, but I am acknowledging that it's a little bit trickier matching for him in terms of it's got to be like a minimum guy or a cheaper guy. For saying like more expensive player, I would say Bruce Brown, but he's making 23 million. Walker Kessler's making 3, so they're on totally different ends of the spectrum in terms of how much those guys cost. But for now, I would say Walker Kessler's number 1, Bruce Brown's number 2. I would have had Cam Johnson probably number 2 before. I'm a little bit more skeptical of just the price that Brooklyn wants for him, but also the fact that Brooklyn and LA already did a trade. I think it's less likely that they come to the table again and do a second trade. But you never know. It's the NBA. Crazy things happen. Grumpy old guy. To win a chip, you have to be able to deploy a 2 big man lineup. I agree. And I also think in, Kranjis, I think clearly, I referenced him a bunch, and I think he makes a lot of smart points. And one point he made on his last pod that I agree with is like, there is a lot of interchangeability between the 3 and the 4. And I know that there's two of the most common arguments are like, AD can't play the 4, which I disagree with. I think he can play the 4, and he's got the defensive versatility. Like, we've seen him defend wings. I think AD can do that. Offensively, I do think there are some things that the Lakers would have to figure out with a Kessler AD front court. I'm not denying that. But defensively, I think you could argue you'd rather have LeBron play the 3, and there's going to be some matchups that will be tough for him. But I actually think LeBron's ISO defense and being able to keep a guy in front of him is better than some of the help defense and the backline rotations and the rim protection. Like, yes, he can get chase down blocks and still be a factor in there. But overall, I think I'd rather have a Walker Kessler or an Anthony Davis in that position, have LeBron be more on the perimeter. And again, you don't have to close that way. You don't have to start that way. You don't have to play 40 minutes that way. It's only potentially in like 3 to 5 minute bursts. And, that could be it, right? But I think with the Lakers personnel, especially if you go you could get funky and go like Max and Dorian at the other 2 spots, Max and Vando, Dorian and Vando. Like you could throw really weird lineups out there where, Vando and Kessler is a little tough from a spacing perspective, but I just think that the optionality going from it being a weakness right now, the backup 5 spot, to a major strength, I think it just changes the dynamic of how the Lakers look. And if AD's like right now, if AD suffers an injury and he's out for 2 weeks, the Lakers are completely screwed unless they have an easy stretch of schedule. If you have Kessler, you could just start him, play him 30 plus minutes a night. And of course, you're going to take a step back offensively, and you have to figure out the offensive hierarchy without AD. But from a defensive perspective, you should be fine without AD and be able to tread water at a minimum. So especially like his contract, his age, his skill set, I think it makes a lot of sense. Stefan, thanks for the responses, Jovan. First channel I've ever contributed a question or comment to, and it was awesome. LOL, appreciate everything you do. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to ask and comment, and you asked some good questions, and hope to continue talking with you in the future. Kane Carter, been a minute, Kane. I feel like it's been, you're usually pretty consistent, but I feel like I haven't talked to you in a bit. Thoughts on Pau Gasol? How did you compare Pau to AD? I love Pau. I grew up on Pau, so there will always be a sentimental part of me that I remember the Pau Gasol trade. I remember that first game in New Jersey against the Nets. And I remember 2008 in Boston and that being sort of like the nadir of Pau Gasol and his Lakers tenure, and KG kind of punking him, and then coming back in 2009 and the pass from Kobe and the and one, and then in 2010, I thought there were stretches of that series and that playoff run where he was the Lakers' best player, not in totality, but certainly for key stretches of games and big moments. And he had a huge Game 7, and he was awesome. So in terms of Pau versus AD, it's a little different, because I think if you look at some of the big man scoring back then, like the all NBA, all-star level bigs, there was still kind of a limitation to how much bigs were scoring, where it was like 22, 23 points a game was a lot for a big man back then. Whereas now there are bigs averaging in the high 20s, low 30s. And I think the game has changed a little bit since the late 2000s, early 2010s. So it's hard to just like compare their numbers, but Powell, I think, had just a skill set where he was so malleable and could fit in almost any situation, where we saw it even later in his career in San Antonio and Chicago. He came more of like a spot up big and a stretch big and a pick and pop guy. And he always had that element to his game, but with the Lakers, it was more in that like 14 to 20 foot range. And then he could occasionally step out and hit threes. And remember Mike D'Antoni tried to use him in that way. But I just think Powell's skill set was that there was like nothing he couldn't do. He could dribble, he could pass, he could shoot, he could score in the post, he could score out of pick and rolls, he could shoot over you, he could pop out. Defensively, what was a good shot blocker. There were certain matchups where more physical bigs could get the best of him, not unlike AD, to be honest. But I think after that 08 series, that really changed Powell, and you just saw a different beast from that point on. So I think AD is more talented and is a just more dominant offensive force in terms of I think Powell's a better passer. I don't think and he's a better shooter. Defensively, AD is of course just different level defender. So I would even say like Powell's more skilled probably offensively, though I think it's close. AD is just a much better defender, and that's to me where there's a big gap between the two. But Powell's a winner, and both with also with Spain and several of the deep medal runs that they went on with the Spanish team. And Powell's just a good dude, and I had the privilege of interviewing him for The Athletic when he was having his jersey retired, and that was a highlight for me of went to the Nike store and had to sit down with him for about 15 minutes, and it was awesome. So I love Powell. Powell's awesome. Sound Automotive Group, thank you for the super chat. Given the new tax aprons, how valuable homegrown talent is moving forward, you think Rob is looking to get seconds back? I'm sure that's part of, I don't think that's like his primary objective, but I'm sure that is part of his goal in some of these conversations, like just getting back younger throw-in players or second round picks, like all that stuff adds up. I think that the flip side of this is I think that there is going to be a high bar for using a first round pick. And that's where, again, I kind of go back to the Keon Ellis conversation from earlier of like, I don't know that the Lakers would view him as enough of a needle mover to use a first round pick when they only have 2 tradable first round picks. A guy like Miles Turner, I think, is at a different level, different caliber. So that's a different conversation. A Cam Johnson, those guys are proven high level starters that, I think would fit very well for the Lakers. But I think it works both ways in terms of asking for certain assets back from teams when negotiating, but also being reticent to just give up your assets because of how valuable they could be down the road. Now, I would just argue that you have this closing window with LeBron and AD. I think they've shown enough to invest in, and I think you got to go for it and just bite the bullet. But I'm not in that seat. I'm not making those decisions. So they have their process, and we'll see in the next 3 weeks how it all plays out. Next one from AJ. Would Detroit or any team with salary cap room help the Lakers facilitate a trade for LaVine? I assume it would have to involve 3 or 4 teams. Potentially, they could get involved. To your point, like it gets tricky because the other thing here is that teams like a Detroit, let's just say hypothetically to your question, gets involved, they're going to want something, right? Like they're not just going to take on unwanted salary that let's say Chicago's like, well, we don't want, let's say Vando potentially has to be in the trade just for salary matching purposes. Let's say Chicago puts their foot down and it's like, hey, we don't want Vando, and we'll take on Gabe, we'll take on Rui, but we're not taking back Vando. He's got 3 more years. He's been injured for the better part of almost 2 seasons. Like, we don't want that player. And okay, let's talk to Detroit. Let's see if we could get Detroit on board. Detroit's going to want something for taking on Jared Vanderbilt. It's not just like, oh yeah, let's just take on this salary for no reason, especially a longer term salary. So does that cost a first? Does that cost like 2 seconds? And then that's all your draft assets that you can trade going into. Is it a pick swap? Like, I don't know exactly what that cost would be, but Detroit's not doing that for free. They're not just taking on Jared Vanderbilt just to take him on. So could a third team potentially get involved to help facilitate that? Yes. It just once, like, anytime, already two teams negotiating and coming to terms on a trade is difficult. You add a third team or potentially a fourth team, it gets even more difficult. And then also, anytime there's a 3 or 4 team trade, all 4 sides have to be touching each other, which means that they have to be sending an asset. Like there has to be some exchange between each of the teams. So that could be a player, a pick, money, whatever. So I mean, those are the 3 things you could trade. But so that complicates it as well. As it's not just as simple as, okay, let's Lakers Bulls figure out your deal and then let's loop in this third team and like reroute Vando and send them something. Like then the Pistons and the Bulls have to be touching and figure out some type of assets that they're going to be sharing with one another. And maybe the Bulls, to get off LaVine's contract and just maybe they said Detroit a second or something, but it's very complicated is my point. And that's what I think makes a LaVine trade, a Jimmy Butler trade, any of these guys making like 40+ million. It's just really hard for the Lakers to match salary with D'Lo gone now. So that's why I'm personally skeptical of them doing that type of swing. But for it to happen, a third team would help. It just then complicates matters further because you got to figure out a whole third team in there, what they want and what the other team is willing to give them. And it's pretty complicated. Eli Cray 1, you lost me at Powell better offensively than AD. Crack for sure. Well, so I said AD is a better scorer. I think Powell's a better shooter and a better passer. I think I think Powell's more skilled offensively, but AD's more effective. Like, I mean, I made the point at the beginning that the numbers are hard to compare just because NBA offenses and big men are used in different ways than they were used 10, 15 years ago. So again, if you look at the leading scorers when Powell was playing in terms of big men versus now, there's a 7 to 10 point gap in a lot of those years. So it's not an exact apples to apples comparison. I said AD's better than Powell. He's much better defensively. And I think he's better offensively. I mean, if you look at the numbers, my point is, I know like their assist numbers are technically closer. I think Powell is a better passer out of the post and a better decision maker on the elbows and stuff. And I think he's a better shooter. Like especially later in his career, he developed into a good 3-point shooter. So again, from a skill perspective, I think Powell could do a lot of things offensively. And like, I think you could even make a case. I mean, them in the post versus each other that's pretty close. But look, AD, especially New Orleans AD, like that was a different animal. His jump shot was in a different space. He's clearly more athletic than Powell, so he's harder to stop from getting to the rim, better finisher around the rim from like lob threat explosion. So like it's close. Overall, AD is the better player, so I'm not saying that. And if you look at the scoring numbers, AD is a better scorer. Like I said that, so I'm not, but I think from a skill perspective, you can make a case. I was just kind of comparing them. And I think there are things that Powell did better than AD. I don't think that's like a crazy statement, but maybe I'm wrong. David Parks, Herb Jones. Well, Herb Jones, I don't know if he's been ruled out for the season, but he's out indefinitely with this shoulder injury. So that kind of killed. Yeah, he tore his posterior labrum. So that's a tough injury. I'm not quite sure what the rehab is on that. Trying to quickly. see what the timeline is. According to a quick Google search, 3 to 4 months of recovery. So we're in January. That's, I mean, look, you can trade for Herb Jones and hope he comes back by the playoffs, maybe. But Madison, no update on Wood. Lakers in 7. Jovan, do you trust Max to be a starting shooting guard in the playoffs? Me has a good limited role when he doesn't do too much. We will have to see if he's playoffs D'Lo or Austin. I do trust Max. I think Max has shown a lot of growth, and I think continues to grow as an offensive player and decision maker. And I've really been impressed. I thought, I talked about it with Jason, but I thought in both the Houston and Dallas games, a lot of the Lakers role players no-showed and looked like they didn't belong against that level of competition. And Max was not one of them. I thought Max played well in both games. And of course, he has the turnover late in the Houston game. And there are things he could have done better. He wasn't perfect, but I thought Max looked like he belonged defensively and offensively in both games. Like, Dallas was not targeting Max. They were targeting Rui. They were targeting Austin, of course, a lot, and targeting Dalton. They were not targeting Max. And, they were trying to get Max off of their primary ball handlers. So I feel like, now to our conversation with Jason, I think it'd be nice to have some insurance and nice to have a better, looking at it right now, I think that the guys behind the Max Rui DFS group are Vando, who's coming off almost not playing for a year, Cam, who is extremely limited offensively, and Dalton, who's extremely limited defensively and has been pretty inconsistent for the past month plus offensively. So I would like to upgrade that spot. And if you could bring in a Bruce Brown and Vando ends up being healthier, I think that's a more reliable kind of core there. Though it does probably cost you Rui, who I think has become a little bit more expendable with Max and DFS and potentially Vando. So I'd like to have the option to not have to close or rely on Max as much, but I think so far he's passed all the tests basically since he reemerged in the rotation, in my opinion. Outside, maybe let's not have him inbounding the ball late for now, but outside of that, I think he's doing well. Norma Maldonado, thanks everyone for the super chats, likes, and shares. Let's get Buha to 20K. Appreciate your support for my boy. Everyone, please be safe and prayers for LA. Bye. Thank you for the super chat, Mom. And yes, I'm trying to get to 20K by the end of the month. I'm optimistic we will get there, but yeah, please like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Christian, have you seen the new Jello song? Are you a fan of it? Yes. I love I love the new Jello song. At first I was like, I don't get the hype behind it, but after I listened to it a few times, I have been singing it. I'm not gonna sing it right now, but I do mess with it. As Ray said, whoa. Eli Cray 1. I like Trae Young and Capella. I do too. Just the price between those two guys. Trey's making, I know Capella's making about 20. Trey's making, I want to say in the 40s. Trey's making 43 million. So between those two, that's 63 million. I don't even think the Lakers could get there if they tried. Like if you put Rui, Gabe, Austin, and Vando, that's about 51. So you're not even, you're like 12 million short. So that's not happening. Ken Carter, Jovan needs to interview the Ball fam again. Seems like they're on a comeback. Yeah, I do. I would love to interview Jello. That would be awesome. And LeVar, of course. any of them. But I think Jello right now, he's got the motion. Kane Carter, how do you think Yao Ming would do on Jokic? That's an interesting one. I think he would bother him in the post, but I think Jokic could take him out to the 3-point line and the elbow. And like we've seen him back down AD and take AD off the dribble. I also think running in transition, he could get him because Yao was a bit slower. But yeah, I mean, Yao was huge. He was one of the few guys I've ever seen give Shaq any problems. And for that reason, I think he would give Jokic some problems. Boy or Bo 12 all day. Jeremy Grant for Rui and Gabe. There was a time I would have done this trade. That time has passed. I've given up on Jeremy Grant. I haven't looked at his numbers in a second. I will pull them up, but I've been very underwhelmed with him this year. And look, maybe it's like I was talking about with Miles Turner. Maybe he just needs to be in a winning situation. But this year he's averaging 15 points a game, 38% shooting, 38% three-point shooting, which is good. But just 38% on 2-point shooting, which is horrible. 3.5 rebounds a game, 2 assists per game, under a steal, exactly 1 block, and again, 15 points a game. So his numbers are his worst numbers since he was a role player in Denver during the bubble season. And from an efficiency standpoint, his worst numbers since his rookie year. So he's 30, about to be 31 in March. The shooting and the previous experience as a role player, energy guy, I like. But the contract, him declining, I'm not as high on Jeremy Grant as I used to be. Evans, Julmis, so you trust Brown more than Grant, really? Yes, I do. So, I mean, Bruce Brown was not that long ago. Bruce Brown was a year and a half ago, what was on Denver and kicking the Lakers' butt in the conference finals, and a big piece, a closing piece for them in a lot of games, closing over KCP or MPJ or Aaron Gordon, depending on the matchup, depending on who wasn't playing well and how well he was playing. So yes, like the knee stuff, it certainly gives me some pause with Bruce Brown, but I think Bruce Brown is more of a winning player than Jeremy Grant. I think Jeremy Grant has kind of just been coasting in Detroit and Portland, playing on crappy lottery teams and not playing serious basketball. Whereas Bruce Brown, I mean, even like he was in Indiana before the Siakam trade and they were playing well. He wasn't necessarily fitting in the best because he was kind of marginalized from like a ball handling perspective, but he was part of that. And then he gets traded to Toronto and then he gets injured. So he's been in a bad situation and he's partly been injured for some of it, but I trust Brown more than Grant for sure. He's also making less money. It's easier to trade for him. Hopes, but he does look kind of bad right now. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see a bigger sample size of Bruce Brown, and if he doesn't look better, then I'm assuming he's going to look better with more time because he hasn't played that much. Schmidt-K, Originals, Buha, I don't get why we want to trade Rui. We just got wing depth the game in ATL where LBJ subbed out and AR max DFS Rui 80 pushes the lead and he didn't come back. Huge. So a couple things here. I think that there's two things here. One is I don't think the Lakers necessarily want to trade Rui, and I've reported as much. I know Eric Pincus just reported as much. So he is a guy that I think it's going to be a relatively high bar for them to trade him. Like I don't have good clarity as to if they would even consider trading him for Bruce Brown. That has been something that I have more been saying from my perspective of what I think makes sense. And I know Jason has been a proponent of that as well. So that's more so been what I think makes sense for what my read on the situation is, what I think the Lakers need, what I know they think they need. Now, I think it's like among the potential trade options, I think Gabe is much more likely to get traded. The problem is if you look at the matching salary, I mean, Neesmith was a name that came up earlier, and that's a guy you can maybe go get. But outside of that, there aren't a lot of impact wings in that Gabe Vincent salary slot. Even if you throw in a minimum guy, it's like you got to get more into the 20 million range to really have like a Cam Johnson, a Bruce Brown, etc. Then the second thing for me is trading Rui for me is contingent on Vando being healthy and Vando looking a certain way. And then also still getting back a wing. Because Bruce Brown, I mean, 6'4". He's more of a guard offensively, but he played the 4 in Brooklyn, and he has some reps playing up at either forward spot. But also defensively, I think he can guard Rui's bigger than him, and Rui can maybe slot onto some centers in a way that Bruce Brown can't. But I don't think there's that big of a defensive difference in terms of their defensive versatility. And I just think Bruce Brown's a better defender. So point is, like, in this hypothetical scenario or reality where the Lakers traded Rui, you are getting back a wing, albeit a smaller wing, but you're also adding in Vando. And then now your wing group is Max, DFS, LeBron, Vando, and Bruce Brown. So to be clear, I do not, if Vando doesn't look right or Vando's not back by a certain time, I think you have to hold on to Rui. Otherwise, you are potentially taking a step back. And that's so I think Vando has to come back, and it sounds like it could be some point soon. I don't have a great idea on timeline. I think they'll be giving us another update here soon. And once we get that and can kind of project that out, the Lakers have a couple of weeks to evaluate this. I think at that point, if Vando starts to look more like himself, you have that confidence that you can potentially move Rui and not necessarily take that step back from a wing depth perspective. Dylan Neville and Brooks, what package to get Bruce Brown? I think something like, it is tough because even with Rui, he's making about $6 million more than Rui. So you almost have to do Rui plus 2 minimum guys. You could expand the trade. One package I mentioned last night on Sean Davis's stream was Bruce Brown and Jakob Poeltl. And that would be about, you could do Rui, Gabe, Vando, and JHS. That gets you to the money and maybe like a first, and then you get Poeltl and Bruce Brown back. In terms of Bruce Brown, it would probably have to be something like Rui, JHS, and Christian Wood for Bruce Brown, and then you throw in, I would really try and make it 2 seconds. I would not love a first for Bruce Brown. I think you'd probably get him for sure for a first, but I would fight to make it 2 seconds. And then you still have a first or 2. If you want to make a separate trade, you could still make the Kessler trade, depending. I mean, like you could do Dalton in a first for Kessler, and then you're adding Kessler and Bruce Brown. Like that to me is a win-win. But I think it would have to be something like Rui, 2 minimum guys, and probably 2 second-round picks. G Isobar, Bruce Brown is a free agent after this year. Hard pass. I mean, certainly something to consider. And you also have the DFS situation where he has a player option and he's extension eligible. I think at some point in February, so that there's a chance that the Lakers could extend him, or he just ends up opting out and re-signing. But I would actually argue I kind of like that Bruce Brown is a free agent, because I think it gives you a little bit more flexibility with your roster building, whereas Rui, like, technically next year will be an expiring contract, but it's still, I think depending on how your roster looks, he's still kind of expendable. And maybe it's good to have that 17 million expiring if the Lakers are going to do something with it. But we've also seen the Lakers have expiring contracts and not do anything with it. They just did it with D'Lo, but they could have moved D'Lo in the past. And they've had like the Malik Beasley, Mo Bamba stuff. So they've, I guess it depends on your confidence of the Lakers being able to flip Rui at some point, but you still probably, to be honest, have to attach an asset to Rui. And, you know, I guess I'm lower on Rui's trade value. I see some people King Carter, did you ever view Rui as an all-star scorer at any point, like when he got drafted? No. To be honest, like I'm not a big draft guy, so I didn't have like strong opinions on Rui coming out of the draft, but I've never viewed him as that. Hale Ford. Good show, Jovan. How about this? Rui, Gabe, and a protected first for Bruce Brown and Agbaji. So time is a flat circle. This was actually something I was touched on earlier in the show. I appreciate the super chat and I appreciate the compliment. I think I would do this if I'm the Lakers. I don't know that Toronto does this. I think Agbaji is someone that they're high on, so they might want more. And depending on what that, like, I would not do 2 firsts and certainly not 2 unprotected firsts for those two. I'd maybe throw in a second, but I really like Agbaji to be honest. So I would do this if I'm the Lakers. I don't know if Toronto does it. Lion King, I predict we get 2 more players that no one has talked about yet. Yeah, but certainly, I mean, I've said that countless times, like the Lakers move in silence, and there's always a chance that they pull off guys that no one has mentioned. You know, I think DFS is a guy that they were linked to for 2 years, and I did a bunch of reporting on DFS, and I think he was someone on the radar. We didn't know the timing of the deal, obviously, and we didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. But I think that there's certainly a possibility that they come off the top rope and get someone we don't know. Okay, I'm going 5 more minutes. Zane, any news on potential buyout candidates? No news yet. One note that I think it's always worth noting is that because the Lakers are a first apron team, they are limited to only signing buyout guys who are making below the taxpayer, or excuse me, the non-taxpayer MLE. So basically, long story short, they cannot sign a Ben Simmons, for example. Ben Simmons is making 40 million. He's making above the non-taxpayer MLE. So it's about 13-ish million. So if a guy's making under 13 million and they're bought out, the Lakers are eligible to sign them. If they're making over 13 million, roughly 13, I don't know the exact number, but it's in that range, they cannot sign them. So that is one potential limiting factor with the Lakers signing guys off the buyout market. The other one is that they don't have a roster spot. And one thing that I haven't touched on that I think it was important to mention in retrospect is another benefit to LA getting further under the second apron is that they could now potentially, because one of the complications for them has been if they waive somebody, that salary still counts on their salary sheet. So there's really no incentive for them to just waive someone, have dead money. And at that point, they were so close to the second apron that if they went out and signed someone, they would have gone above the second apron. And that would have had all these consequences of higher luxury tax bill, all these restrictions that come with the second apron. But because now they're about 3.5 million or so under the second apron after the DFS D'Lo trade, they can technically waive a Christian Wood or I mean, I don't think they'd waive JHS, but a Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, or Jackson Hayes, like one of the minimum guys, I think it would probably be Wood, and then go sign someone and they would be signing someone at a prorated amount. So they still would be taking a bit of a salary hit. Like the Christian Wood salary would still count, but the prorated amount of how much they'd have to pay the vet minimum guy that they'd be adding, or the buyout guy, whatever, that would, I believe they'd still be under the second apron. So they could do something like that. But the two challenges here are they can't sign someone who's making above that 13 million, or was making above that 13 million on their previous contract. And currently they don't have an empty roster spot. So they'd have to clear one either in a trade or by waiving someone, eating that money, and then just making sure the player they're signing, it's at an amount that they're not going into the second apron. All right, Dork Vader, you are spamming the chat, so I'm putting you in a timeout. But you're saying Miles Turner and Cam Thomas. I've already talked about both those guys. Big Miles Turner guy. Cam Thomas, I have some reservations about his defense and his fit on an elite team, but maybe they can get him to buy in. Tali Khalifa, Jovan, do you like anyone from the buyout market if we somehow open a roster spot? It depends who is on the buyout market, to be honest. That's still unclear. And most of those guys they're going to try and trade them first and foremost, and then maybe they'll get bought out in their new situations, or maybe they won't get traded and then we'll get bought out. So I think there's a lack of clarity as to like who's going to be on the buyout market. In terms of current free agents, the two guys I like are Markelle Fultz and Dennis Smith Jr. So potentially adding one of those guys as like a back end guard gamble I like. But right now, until we have a better sense of the buyout market, I don't have a strong opinion on it. I do think in general, buyout guys are typically overrated. If you look at there's a PJ Brown in 08 with the Celtics. There have been guys who have made a difference, but for the most part, like even going back to last year with Spencer Dinwiddie, it was like Spencer Dinwiddie had some nice moments, but he didn't make like that big of an impact for the Lakers, though he did kick their ass in the Dallas game the other night. But most of the time, buyout guys don't make that much of an impact, and they kind of exist more in theory than reality. Ryan Rich, do you think the Lakers trade the first round picks or just the seconds for minimum upgrades on the roster? I don't think the Lakers are going to trade both first round picks. I think I've come more around to like probably not trading a first at all. I've talked about, so I think previously I had said the most likely was like trading a first, second most likely was not trading a first, and third most likely was trading both. I think I'd probably flip it to not trading a first being most likely, trading one being second most likely, trading both being third most likely. So I think more likely the second smaller move path, but these things are very fluid. They could change at any moment. They could go trade the first tomorrow and I look like an idiot, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I would certainly lean one first compared to both, but I think for now it's looking more like a smaller potential move rather than a bigger one, which I know fans don't want to hear. And L, do you think we need another high volume shooter? Lakers could always use more shooting. Any team could use more shooting. I think, sure, but I would say, backup five and another, like baked into, in my opinion, the two-way wing is ideally like a guy who can shoot. Now, I know Bruce Brown kind of undermines that entire argument. So that's maybe not, but like a Cam, if they could get a Cam Johnson, that's a high volume shooter. I think the bigger problem is there just aren't many high volume shooters available. And if you look at most of the guys out there, it's a pretty short list. David Parks, Jonas Valanciunas update, not much of one. Like I said in the past, I felt like them waiting on trading for him and then eventually trading for DFS lowered the likelihood. Now they could still do it with Gabe, and it would probably be like Gabe and two second round. I keep messing those up. 2 second round picks for Valanciunas. That doesn't move the needle for me that much, but it's still a possibility. I just think the longer it goes, the less likely it is. Sky Falcon 5, we still have an MLE 2 that can be used as a trade exception. Yeah, they have some trade exceptions, not to get too into the weeds here, but there are other things that they can do. But yeah. Jovan, top 3 or 5 favorite cuisines? That's tough. I would probably say in no particular order, Mexican, Italian, and Chinese, I would say. I think you could throw in Japanese in there. You could throw in Greek in there. My mom's going to kill me if I don't say Puerto Rican. My dad will get upset if I don't say Serbian. So, but there's some overlap there with some of the other ones. But I would say that those are my top. G.I. Sobar, Jovan, would you do Rui, Gabe, Wood, and picks, or Collins and Kessler? Collins is an underrated defender and very athletic. Sure. I think Kessler is the key there for me, as long as you're getting Kessler. For a second, I thought you were saying Collins and Collins Sexton, and then I was going to say no, but it is Kessler and Collins. Collins is making a lot, so from a salary perspective, it does get, I mean, I assume you did the trade machine and that works, but I agree with you. He's an underrated defender and he is athletic. I just think he's a bit of a tweener big where he's kind of more of a 5, but then he doesn't have the size of a 5. And offensively, I do wonder like what his fit would be on this team. I guess maybe he's kind of the Rui replacement in some ways and offers a higher ceiling, more of a big than Rui. But the key for me would be Kessler and not trading both firsts. Robert Gonzalez, you give the Lakers a healthy Aaron Nesmith next to Vando and DFS, the defensive energy will boost through the rest of the team. Yeah, I would throw Max in there too, but yeah, that's a really good point. What do you think about a Malik Monk? This one's from Evan. What do you think about a Malik Monk trade? Malik is making, I want to say, okay, yeah, he's up there around, he's in the high teens. So he's making 17.4 this year. I mean, if you flipped, the problem is that's a tough, like you could do Rui. I don't think that makes the Lakers necessarily better because you're losing a wing. And I mean, if you could throw in Keon Ellis or, yeah, I don't know. I like Malik going back to his time with the Lakers, but it's a little bit of a tough salary to fit in there unless you're just trading him straight up for Rui. But I don't like, he's just not good enough defensively, in my opinion. David Parks, Gabe, and a first for Kobe White. That's interesting. I mean, I like Kobe White. How much is he making? Defense is a little bit of a concern with him. He's making about, yeah, I mean, so it works with Gabe. You'd have to throw in another minimum guy with Gabe, but I would consider that. I still think, I think like a guard playmaker type is a third need compared to wing and big, but if you do another trade, I like that. Now I see I'm catching up to the chat with the food. I see Orange Sunset Thai. I'm not a big Thai guy, but my wife loves Thai, so I need her to convert me. Haley Ford, Thai, Italian, and American soul food. American soul food. I mean, I was considering, like, my favorite food is cheeseburgers. I love cheeseburgers. That's like last meal. Give me a great smash burger, cheeseburger, and I will take that as my last meal. I also love steak, so I guess there's a trend there. Red meat. Sorry to some, but yeah, American soul food, just classic American food. I know, like, good classic American food though, not just anything. But yeah, Zach LaVine. I mean, it's just a tough contract, man. It's really tough. Zane, favorite TV shows. Favorite TV show of all time is The Wire. I would also throw in. I mean, I'm kind of a classic TV guy in terms of like The Wire, Breaking Bad, Sopranos. Those are probably my top three. In terms of like guilty pleasures, I will watch Love Is Blind, Too Hot to Handle. Currently watching The Ultimatum season 3 with my wife. So we will watch some of the dating stuff and then comment on the couples and our thoughts on it, and like that's kind of been a bonding thing for us. Ridiculous. Jovan, when Bleacher Report writers, the bottom feeders of sports journalism, aggregate from your podcast, they credit the Athletic in the headline to make it seem more official. How is this legal? I mean, technically, anything I say is a representation of the Athletic because I am a full-time employee and I do. The Athletic is in all my social handles. Even on the podcast, I say Jovan, Lakers beat writer for the Athletic. So, I mean, this is a whole other thing that you're going to get me started on my aggregation tangents. It has been a bit of a headache for me for the last few years of just how much stuff is either completely misrepresents what I said, in some cases completely makes up or stretches something I said. It's really frustrating, but yeah, I mean, but that's a tactic. Nas, how do you eat your steak? Medium rare. That's really the only way you can do it, or rare, but nothing above that. Hallie Ford, yeah, good ribeye, cooked medium to medium rare is the ticket. Yeah, for me, ribeye or New York strip. I do love a great fillet as well, but I tend to like some of the bigger meats. All right, NBA 2024. Let's chill with the spamming. Laker Girl 36. I did not see your super chat. Laker Girl 36, would you come on my podcast? I appreciate the super chat. And yes, I will come on your podcast. Shoot me an email at jbuha@theathletic.com and we will figure out a time and place. Ray, come rant, Jovan. We want to hear. This is a safe space. I mean, just the whole aggregation thing is, they just drive, like, because again, I've mentioned it previously, but it's just it's not good. Eli Cray, how about McCollum and Zion? Salary wise, that's going to be really tough. So McCollum is making about low 30s. Let's see, let's pull it up. McCollum's making 33, and then Zion is making, I mean, anything above 40s is really hard for the Lakers to get to unless they're trading LeBron or AD. Zion's making 36, so that's 69 combined. So if, just talked about it with Trae Young and Clint Capella, 63 is hard for them to get to. 69 is tough. I will say NBA 24, I put you on timeout, but how can the Lakers get more help for AD? Get a better backup, and or get another better perimeter defender, but like make his job easier with the defense. Nas, I would take Zion. His money's not guaranteed. It's just tough. Like, so, I mean, you could do Rui, Gabe, and Vando, and like a first, two firsts. I don't know exactly what that price is, but just in terms of salary matching, I'm trying to get. I mean, throw Dalton in. I still think a team can outbid them if it really comes down to it. Revs, Jovan, any games you play in your spare time? Not as much of a gamer as I used to be, like growing up, middle school, high school. I think that's honestly why I'm a night owl, is I used to play video games until like 2, 3 a.m. on school nights because I had a TV and an Xbox in my room, which I don't recommend if if you want your kids to go to sleep. So I will say, like, my son plays Fortnite, so he's gotten me more into Fortnite of us playing together. And I used to be obsessed with Gears of War, so I do have the latest Gears of War that I'll occasionally play, but I typically more of like a TV movie guy than video games. Ryan Craig, who's a realistic, athletic defensive guard we can get. I think Bruce Brown and Lonzo Ball are both guys that are going to be available. Josh Green, kind of more of a wing than a guard. That's a tough player archetype to get. So there aren't many off the top of my head. I mean, David Parks here is bringing up Marcus Smart. I would like him, and I think he's making a reasonable salary. Could you flip Gabe for Marcus Smart? I mean, the shooting, some of the offensive decision making, I think would drive a lot of Laker fans crazy. But defensively, he slipped a bit, but it's still, he's making 20. It's kind of tough, actually. Ridiculous. It's not a safe space, though. There are BR writers watching this right now salivating off Jovan's opinions. They get paid for it. It's absurd. Yeah, I mean, look, if people want to, I get people it's a business. People have stuff. They got to do their job and they got to aggregate and get clicks. But like, just present what I'm saying in a reasonable, in an accurate manner. And if I say the Lakers are going to be patient, but the exceptions are Jonas Valanciunas, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Cam Johnson, and then the next day they go out and trade for Dorian Finney-Smith, and you say I just said the Lakers are going to be patient, and you leave out that second part to try and make me look bad and to get more clicks, like, that's where I have an issue with it. Shane, I think we need to stop believing we could be a contender unless we get a true ceiling raiser, i.e. Ingram, LaVine, Cam Johnson, etc. That's been kind of my point earlier when I was talking about Robert Williams. I would throw Robert Williams in there just because I think he's not an offensive ceiling raiser the way that those three guys are that you're talking about, but I think from a defensive size, athleticism perspective, he can be a big ceiling raiser. I'm with you on Ingram and Cam Johnson. I'm personally skeptical of LaVine because I think it just, unless you're trading Austin, which I don't think the Lakers would do, and I have my reservations about, like, I think I don't love a LaVine Austin backcourt in crunch time or even starting necessarily. And I just think people people love the scoring and the highlights with LaVine, but I don't know how much of it actually translates to winning basketball. Like, he's just never been in that situation. And I'm not a big LaVine guy. Ingram, I'm open to, if the Lakers could get him. Cam Johnson, I think makes a lot of sense. I just have reservations about Brooklyn and LA trading again. I would throw Walker Kessler in here. I would throw Robert Williams in here. Bruce Brown, I'm not as high on in terms of like true ceiling raiser, but I think there are several guys that if they pop can really help the Lakers. And to your point, I think they probably need to go get one of those types. Pure Massa, is Cam Johnson worth 2 first-round picks? I don't think so. But they might get it. So I guess if he goes for 2 first-round picks, he was worth it, right? But I don't think so. I'm going to do these last two. What about a LaVine AO backcourt? I think the price to get AO would be pretty high from Chicago. And then that's to say nothing of actual salary matching there. That would be my one concern, but I do like AO. And if you could get him, that opens, like I'm more open to the LaVine trade. Israel says, why do you all think LaVine is a game changer? Let's not forget the last time the Lakers went out for a $40+ million star. I think he's better than Russ, but he's just not been in a winning environment. I have real concerns about the defense. I have real concerns about taking an offensive step back and playing off the ball more. And I also think he's slightly overrated. But Laker Girl 36, I sent you an email. Okay, I will be on the lookout for it. And Craig, what day is the trade deadline in February? It is February 6th. Last one here from Battle Bar. Jovan, does DFS start next game? It's a good question. I lean toward no. I think he's going to start at some point. I think maybe they give Rui a little bit more rope. I think it, under normal circumstances, it probably would have made sense just to pull the plug and start DFS coming off of the Texas trip when he just was so much better than Rui. With this whole situation and that, like, maybe they still do it, I would lean more toward Rui continuing to start, but it's certainly trending toward DFS eventually starting and being a bigger piece within the rotation than Rui. But the 5 minutes went for about 25, 30 minutes as tends to be the case on my streams. So I'm going to wrap here, but I want to say I thank you all so much for taking the time to watch and listen on a football Sunday. For anyone in LA, Southern California, anyone around the fires, anyone affected by the fires with friends and family, my heart goes out to you, thoughts and prayers, and scary situation. We are not through it yet. These fires are raging. There's still the possibility that they continue to spread, that new ones start in the next few days, next week or so. So we're getting to, getting through it, but still not out of it quite yet. But it will be nice to see the Lakers play, hopefully tomorrow against San Antonio, return to some normalcy, have a bit of an escape, and retire Michael Cooper's jersey. And should be a nice night of healing and the donation drive and all that stuff. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will be back tomorrow night after the Lakers Spurs game, going live. I will talk to you then. Thank you all again. Stay safe out there, and I will talk to you very soon.